What's going on, everyone? This is my second video on the Integra project. I'm going to be trying to do a few things today, one of them being possibly removing the crankshaft from the block and then getting the shift linkage removed from the other Integra that's sitting in the parking lot. We have an Arctic blast coming in Wisconsin pretty soon that's supposed to be even colder than the one that we're already currently going through, so I want to get that pulled out before that Arctic blast hits, because there's no way in hell I'm going outside in that cold and sitting under a car pulling linkage. So I'm going to see if I have time to squeeze in both of those things, but I'm definitely going to be tackling the linkage first because that is an outside thing compared to this, which is an inside thing. So I don't have to worry about being super cold in here at least. But all I got to do to remove the crankshaft now is get the alternator pulled off, because the belt is actually I believe it's the only thing holding the crankshaft pulley on at this point, because you can't really tell, but I can feel it wiggling. I borrowed my friend's massive Matco impact to get that removed. It came off in like 1 second, which was awesome. And then I just have to get all those bolts for the holders pulled out. And the crankshaft should, in theory, come out. I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, but I'm sure there's not much more to it. With that being said, I'm going to go start tackling the shifter and shifter linkage removal. All right, I got the part of the center console that covers the e-brake off. All I had to do is slide both of the seats all the way forward and remove the 4 screws that hold it in back here. One of them is behind the seat belt, so that's why you have to slide the seat all the way forward to get, and I had to step out of the car to get to it, but it was very easy to remove. All right, the whole center console is removed, and I lifted the boot that goes around the shifter. I lifted that off, and you can actually see the concrete below the car. So I'm pretty sure now all that I have to do is go under the car and just remove some 10 and 12 millimeter bolts, and the entire shifter and shift linkage assembly should, in theory, just drop out. And then I also have it zip tied to hang it up so it's not just dragging on the ground at the front of the car. So I have it zip tied up to something in the engine bay so it doesn't just drag on the ground. Gotta cut those zip ties and the whole thing should drop out. All right, so as it turns out, all I had to do is remove the two 12 millimeter bolts that just hold the linkage on right there, and then the whole thing drops right out. And then I just gotta cut the zip ties, which you can see right there, the zip ties at the front. That's all that's holding it up. Oh, nice. Oh, it just fell out. Well, linkage is out. Let's get a good glory shot of all this beautiful, amazing Wisconsin rust. Oh, yeah. All right, well, I was attempting to remove the manual transmission mount so I could salvage it and use it for my car, and the bolt right there on the right side, the left side came out. It was a pain in the ass, but I got it out. The right side one does not want to come out at all, which is really weird because I can actually wiggle the whole bolt, but it does not want to come out for some reason. So it's loose, but it's not loose at all. It doesn't even turn anymore. So that's kind of weird. I don't know. Might just buy a new mount anyway, because all those tears doesn't look the best, so I'll probably just buy a new mount. I know originally I said I was going to remove my clutch line from the master cylinder right there and just remove the entire thing all the way up to the slave cylinder and then put it in my car. But honestly, it would probably just be a lot easier and quicker to just install my own clutch lines and just take the slave cylinder itself and do all the clutch lines myself. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. I had a slight change of plans. Instead of working on pulling the crankshaft first, I'm going to be working on pulling the dash, because I need to remove the ECU to engine harness before it gets too cold, because I really don't want to deal with that when it gets that cold. So I'm going to work on pulling this first, hopefully get the whole dash removed pretty quickly so I can get that harness completely removed and set in my garage. And then after that, we'll work on the crankshaft as my next project. In the process of pulling the dash from the old Integra, I got the manual cluster out that doesn't have the automatic gear indicators. So I will be installing that in the new Integra once I pull the dash out of that one as well. I know I said in my previous video that I wasn't so sure if the harness in that car was the correct harness because the previous owner of the Shell said that it is in fact a B18B1 manual harness. At first glance, I wasn't so sure because I thought it looked different from the harness in this vehicle, but upon further comparison, it does in fact look to be identical to this harness, so there shouldn't be any issues with plug and play. Besides maybe a few broken plugs that I have to borrow off this car and splice onto that one, I believe there should not be any issues using that harness. And obviously, if there are any issues, I will definitely find out when I start plugging things into the engine, because obviously if it's the wrong harness, some things won't plug in, but I think it'll probably be fine. I guess we'll just have to find out in the future. I've spent countless hours today trying to pull everything apart once I got the dash off to figure out why I keep getting held up when I try to pull the harness out. It always is caught on something, and I decided to pull this. I had to get that sagging down to pull this out completely so I could expose this, and as it turns out, this harness just runs to many other things that I wasn't aware of. So with that being said, I'm not going through all the trouble of disassembling everything in the front because that would just be way more painful than fixing a few broken plugs on that harness. Because with this being a parts car, the benefit of that is I can just snip the plugs that are intact off of this one and splice them onto the harness on that one. It looks like two of the broken plugs in the Shell are actually just headlight plugs because they're white. They're white plugs, and I looked at this one, and the plugs that go into the headlights in this one are also white, so there aren't many of them. There's only about 2 or 3 damaged ones, so if I have to do a little bit of splicing, that's not a problem to me at all. It'd be way less time and effort than it would be to even try getting that thing out, because I've already spent hours just to get this far, and it's honestly looking like it would be way more of a job than it would be to just do a little bit of wiring. So with that being said, that's going to be happening in the future, but not today because it's getting pretty cold outside. I also looked under the steering column area in my other Integra to see what the situation is with these wires. I looked and tried to see if I could find any of these same plugs in this general area in my other Integra, and I didn't find anything like that. So I'm still not sure what the situation is with all this wiring or why it's hanging down here, where those plugs go. I can't see anywhere that they plug into under here. Maybe I just have to look harder, but I'm gonna worry about that another day because I've been out in this cold for about 7 hours now. My hands are starting to go a little bit numb, if I can be honest, so that concludes today's video. In the next video, I got a few things that I want to get done. One of those things being removing the crankshaft, because I was not able to get to that in today's video, despite that being the original plan. I'll probably try to figure out what's going on with the wiring under the dash in this vehicle, because I'd rather get that squared away right away. I will probably be pulling the slave cylinder from that vehicle and maybe getting the clutch line situation sorted out. And then I will also be swapping out the manual cluster for the automatic cluster, because as it turns out, what I learned today is you don't even have to pull the whole dash to do that. You just basically have to undo the screws, all the stuff that holds it in, and it should pop right out. So I will conclude today's video. I'm going to go upstairs and get nice and warm, and I'll see y'all in the next one.